Good morning, everybody. If I could please encourage you to grab a seat, we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. Woo! Again, if I could just encourage everyone to please grab a seat, we're going to go ahead and get started with our programming this morning. All righty. If I could please encourage everyone to keep voices low, we're going to go ahead and get started. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the 4th Annual Delaware County Sustainability Conference. Woo! My name is Becca Yurkovich, and I am the County Sustainability Officer for Delco. And this week has been a marathon with 15 virtual sessions and more than 37 speakers. We are thrilled to have you join us to finish off this tremendous week with our closing keynote celebration. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some quick housekeeping. So first, for disclosure, we're going to request that during the session, everyone keep voices low as we are live streaming to YouTube today, in addition to our in-person gathering, so we can review later. Also, guests are welcome to help themselves to some breakfast and coffee. However, during this 1 hour, we just ask that if you can remain seated and refrain from getting up, we would greatly appreciate it. Food will be available following the presentations. You heard my spiel earlier, but in an effort to be zero waste, we are doing composting this morning. So all plates and food can go in our green compost bins. The utensils, though, unfortunately have to go in the waste. And finally, we will have time for questions for our keynote, and we just ask that you refrain until the end of the presentation to raise a hand for questions. So to begin this morning, I'm very excited to welcome Councilman Robert Josephs from Tinicum Township to welcome us to this beautiful town.
Good morning, everyone. It is great to see everyone here today. I'm Roger Joseph. I'm one of the commissioners here in Tinicum Township, and I'd like to welcome you to Tinicum on behalf of the Board of Commissioners and the residents, or as we like to call it, the island. We have a lot of history here. I encourage you to go over and check out the 1799 Lazaretto building. We have a couple museums in there. On your way out, too, check out Governor Prince Park right across the way. That's one of our best landmarks. But I just wanted to thank everybody for coming, and the exhibits are all great. I walked through. This is amazing. It's great to see everyone out here, and it's great to see the engagement. So thank you, everybody, and have a good day.
Thank you so much, Roger. And now to welcome us to Delaware County, I would like to welcome Dr. Monica Taylor.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Delaware County Council Chair, Dr. Monica Taylor, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to the final day of the 2025 Delaware County Sustainability Conference. First, I want to begin by thanking those whose leadership and dedication have made this incredible week possible. Becca Yurkovich, our Director of the Office of Sustainability, and other conference planning team members, Sue DePompio, Sean Rush, Michelle Signora, Karen Wilwall, and Amanda Hagan. I know you've been putting in long hours, literally working with partners from Tinicum to Taiwan. Council and the county team recognize the long hours, the endless coordination, and the million details that have required your attention. Your work has been outstanding, and we're incredibly grateful for everything you've done to bring this amazing conference to life once again this year. And while all of us appreciate the effort, I have to say it, this level of output is not exactly sustainable. We talk a lot about sustainability. Maybe we can start with your calendars. Next, thank you as well to Councilman Josephs for kicking us off and welcoming us to beautiful Tenneco Township, a reminder of how closely our natural landscapes are tied to the well-being of all of our communities. Over the past few days, we've seen an incredible exchange of ideas, strategies, and inspiration. And at a time when federal priorities are clearly shifting, if not reversing, Delaware County remains steadfast in our commitment to sustainability, to meaningful climate action, to cleaner air and water, and to ensuring that our future is both environmentally and socially resilient. We're not just talking, we're doing. This week, during our Office of Sustainability update, we shared several exciting projects already underway. We're kicking off a major LED lighting replacement project at the Government Center to improve our energy efficiency. We've revamped our recycling program to make it more effective and accessible for staff and residents. And we've partnered with neighboring counties to jointly purchase renewable energy through the Sustainable Energy Partnership, because regional collaboration is essential to long-term progress. Equity and access remain at the heart of everything that we do. That's why we introduced a new format for this year's conference, to better meet the needs of residents and community partners. By incorporating virtual evening sessions, we created opportunities for residents to engage from home, after work, after dinner, even while juggling the kids, caregiving, or other responsibilities. This format allowed more people to learn, contribute, and connect with county and regional experts, and even sustainability experts from Taiwan, in a way that's flexible, inclusive, and reflective of real life. These values of health, equity, and proactive leadership were also front and center in one of yesterday's most impactful sessions, Our Homes, Our Health, led by members of our health department, including Director Laura Warner and Shannon Dade, along with Dr. Kristen Motley. This session explored how environmental exposures like lead continue to affect our communities and highlighted the county's ongoing efforts to identify and address those risks head-on. We've also seen the power of partnership on full display this week. Whether it was in the Green Space Task Force session on preserving open space, or the conservation on coordinated watershed planning with emergency services, planning, and natural lands. The message is clear. We are stronger when we all work together. Even globally, our sister county agreement with Taiwan reflects our shared commitment to sustainability beyond borders and its importance of local leadership on global challenges. Before we get started today, I want to sincerely thank the many people who made this conference possible. The conference planning team, our Sustainability Commission members, the county staff and departments who contributed their time and expertise, including my colleague, Councilwoman Elaine Schaefer, and staff from our planning, emergency services, and health department. Our community presenters, who graciously shared their knowledge and their wonderful expertise, and of course, all of you, our participants, for showing up and taking part in this important work and these important conversations. We have an exciting final day ahead, and I, like many of you, am especially looking forward to hearing from someone who's helped generations of Philadelphians understand weather and climate with clarity and urgency. Of course, I'm speaking of Glenn Hurricane Schwartz. We're honored to have him here with us this morning. Thank you again, and let's continue to work together.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I think you really hit home with what Delaware County is aiming to achieve in this year's conference with expanded accessibility and that real emphasis on partnerships. And I'd be remiss before handing it over to Glenn, I just want to acknowledge one more group of folks who made this week's conference possible. So I would really like to thank our generous sponsors, as their support allows us to continue to host this event completely free of charge for our community members. So I'd like to thank the Solid Waste Authority, who's in the back over here, for as they were our exclusive sponsor of our swag today. So thank you. Be sure to stop by Leslie and thank them for your bamboo cutlery. I would also like to thank our venue sponsors, Capazzoli's Catering, for allowing us to use this beautiful space free of charge. And Tinicum Township, so unfortunately while we're not in there for exhibiting, we will have the opportunity to still go next door to the quarantine station to explore some of our finest history. Also, I would like to thank our exclusive session sponsors this week, HRG and Natural Lands. And finally, Solstice Home Performance, Planet Green Thrift Store, and Green Weaver Landscapes. We are extremely happy to share that because of their generous support, this year's conference was 100% sponsor funded with no county dollars expended. Now, enough thank yous. Now for the main event. For decades, Glenn the Hurricane Schwartz has braved Philadelphia's harshest storms to ensure that we are receiving the most up-to-date weather information across the Philadelphia region. Glenn served as a professional in weather forecasting for more than 50 years after receiving his Bachelor's of Science in Meteorology at Penn State. Glenn has served as a professional meteorologist in more than 7 major cities and with major organizations including the National Weather Service, National Hurricane Center, which is named after him, and the Weather Channel, before serving as Chief Meteorologist for NBC10 Philadelphia. Glenn is one of the best-known and respected meteorologists in Philadelphia TV history, known for his charismatic delivery of science-based information and for his incredible Bowtie collection. Behind the screen, Glenn has also authored award-winning Philadelphia area weather book and the novel The Weathermaker, in which he shared his knowledge of over 20 years studying climate change. Glenn is widely considered an expert on this topic, testifying before the Pennsylvania State House and the Philadelphia City Council regarding climate impacts in our region. Since his retirement in 2022, Glenn has focused his attention on bringing awareness to this crucial issue and inspiring communities to take action. So now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Glenn Schwartz.
Thank you. All right, the first thing, is the mic going? It is. You got the mic, okay. First thing I'd like to do is invite all the people in the back to come and sit in real chairs, just to make it look a little busier. I don't like talking in front of partial crowds. They're all here, so come and join us. You can also see the screen a little bit better when you're closer up. I already congratulate everybody in the front row for having the courage to be in the front row, because it never happens. I'd also like to explain or halfway apologize for the glasses. These are not my normal glasses. I just had cataract surgery earlier this week on one eye. The second eye's coming in a couple weeks. And so I'm in a temporary state. So if I start stumbling a little bit, it's not because I've had too much to drink. It's because I'm a little bit uneasy about walking. I was okay driving here, but when my head moves, sometimes things get a little bit dizzy. Now, as Becca mentioned, I've dealt with the weather pretty much my whole life. I wanted to be a meteorologist since I was in the 5th grade, 10 years old. Most of you not old enough to know the people who inspired me to become meteorologists, the TV meteorologists from the early days in Philadelphia and even national television. One of them was Dr. Francis Davis, who was on Channel 6. There was Herb Clark on Channel 10. And then there was my favorite, Wally Kinnan, the weatherman, on Channel 3. Wally and Dr. Davis were 2 of the first 3 officially certified TV meteorologists in the entire country. Okay? We're fortunate, we've been fortunate for all of these decades to have professional meteorologists, at least from time to time, on various stations. And the forecasts, and I can testify to this, got way better over the years. Back when I started, it was gutsy to issue a 3-day forecast. The hurricane forecast was like for the next day. And the reason that they only did that was because the science was not there. Didn't understand the atmosphere enough, didn't have fast enough computers to be able to make accurate forecasts past 3 days. So why even bother trying? I'm misleading you. Well, those computers have really improved. Just a few days ago was D-Day, the anniversary of D-Day, June 6th, 1944. The most important weather forecast in history. And Wally Kinnan was one of the meteorologists involved in this. And there weren't many meteorologists around in those days. What they did was that they grabbed scientists from different fields. They said, oh, you're a physicist? Okay, you're now a meteorologist. We're going to send you to school for a couple months, and now you'll forecast for the entire U.S. Army and the Marines. So he's in this building, and his job was to draw on weather maps and analyze what the map was like. And they had ships out in the Atlantic, and obviously not all over the world like they do now. And he would meticulously go do this, finish up his map, go to the end of the hall, and slide the map under the door of this highly secured part of the building. And he had no idea what was in there, or who was in there, or what was being done in there, how anybody was using his information. Turns out it was the first computers covered an entire room, like the size of this ballroom. This is 1,000,000 times more powerful than their whole room. And there's a lot of data that goes into trying to make it a forecast. And now we have data from all over the world, weather stations, ships, weather satellites, radars. The technology keeps getting better, the science keeps getting better, and weather forecasts have gotten better and better over the years. So now, I actually went to my boss, I guess it was maybe 20 years ago, And I told them, I just did an experiment for a year, practicing and making sure that we could do this, but I think we can now do a 10-day forecast. And that's when we started it. Only when the science allowed this to happen. Now, it's not necessarily as good as it was even a year ago. And so this is one of the concerns about weather, and it's also a concern about climate. And I won't get into necessarily the details of that unless you want to ask questions afterward. What I'm going to talk about is the latest science. And what you have heard or read most likely is out of date, obsolete, and what I would refer to as Pollyannish. Like, well, if we did this, if we stopped putting out carbon dioxide tomorrow, we could, what? Who's going to stop putting out carbon dioxide tomorrow? It's not going to happen. So my philosophy is, tell it like it is. Some of you may recognize this picture, this person, others may not. Howard Cosell pretty much invented sports journalism. And he did it by, that's his slogan, telling it like it is. I don't care who it hurts, who it offends, I'm telling the truth. And more recently, Tupac, I'm not perfect, but I'll always be real. And that's the other thing, be real. And that's what we got. So every talk that I give is at least attempting to be focused on the area and the subject matter of this particular event. So I'm going to start right here with this part of the country and even this part of the state. Hurricane Ida, 2021, the last big disaster. It's not advancing. There you go. What? I think we, okay. So these are pictures in Delaware County. Are you tired of seeing this? Well, get used to it, because you're going to see more of that, and the water's going to be higher. So when you hear people say this is the new normal, you can say in your head or yell at the TV or whatever and say, no, that is not true. It's only the new normal for today, because things are changing. And what is normal today will not be more normal a few years from now. Hurricane Floyd was a record flood in this area in 1999. And here's what we're dealing with. We have to adjust to the future before we get there, or else we're going to pay. So the new normal, this is not a hoax. Anybody, you have any conversation with somebody who uses the word hoax, just walk away. Because you're not going to convince them of anything, because they have been brainwashed and lied to. Because there may be like 30,000 climate scientists in the world, approximately. There may be 4 who think it's a hoax or greatly exaggerated. I mean, this is as known, as accepted as gravity in a scientific field. There's just no question about it, and partly you'll see why. And we have all of these impacts, not just with the temperature, with droughts, with the ice melting, floods, hurricanes, fires, all of it climate fueled. So here's Ida, Chadds Ford, 2021. That was the record. But it wasn't always the record. The Chats Ford major flood stage was 13 feet. We set the record. Hurricane Agnes, 1972, beat the major flood by 3.5 feet. I also missed my college graduation because of that storm. It flooded Pennsylvania, especially central Pennsylvania, so bad that the governor got on TV and radio and begged us not to come back for the graduation ceremonies. So I got the diploma, but I never got it presented to me. What an irony that it was a hurricane that did that. Well, this turned into number 2. After Agnes, was number 2 when Floyd hit and beat the record by close to a foot. And then Ida, 21 feet. So if you're preparing for the record flood of Hurricane Floyd, and you can withstand, I can withstand 19, 20 feet. You're flooded in Ida. And if you could withstood Ida, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to handle the next big one. So Ida had up to 10 inches of rain. This is the rainfall map. Here's where we are right now, right about where that shaky red thing is. So this area north of Philly that drains down into the southeast had up to 10 inches of rain in one day, and that created the massive record flooding. Okay, so remember that, 10 inches. You're going to plan for another 10-inch storm. Maybe you need to do more than that. I live in Bucks County now, not too far from my house. This is July 2023. They had 7 inches of rain in 45 minutes. The all-time record officially for Philadelphia for one day is 8 inches. They got almost that in 45 minutes. And if you think that was a lot, we're not the only ones dealing with floods. You've probably seen videos of it on the internet, on the news, all over the world. This was the worst flood of last year in Spain. Tourist area, anybody want to travel to Europe? I'm afraid to travel to a lot of different places. They had 20 inches of rain in just 6 hours. If they can get that, that's not in the mountains or anything. That wasn't a hurricane that did it. Look at those cars. 20 inches in 6 hours. So 10 inches for a day? That's not enough to plan for. We got flood disasters all over the world, practically every continent, many more. And then we go back to last year in this country. This is a little bit painful to me because Asheville is an absolutely beautiful part of this country. I sent one of my best friends to move near there. He wanted to know where there was a place that had nice, comfortable weather and was away from the coast and inexpensive, whatever. And I swear, I sweated more last year when this happened. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I killed my friend. But his house survived it. A lot didn't. This is the rainfall map. This is a hurricane hitting the coast. North Carolina is way away from the coast, and still they got up to 15 inches. That was a relatively mountainous area. And people, lots of retirees go to that part of the country, and they think they're safe from the weather. Of course, a lot go to Florida. They should know better. But at least from a weather standpoint, that they're safe. This is Hurricane Milton. That is as perfect a picture. You know, if it wasn't so dangerous, it would be a work of art. That's nature. That is just incredible. And the tighter the eye, the more perfect the eye, the stronger it is. And at that time, it became a Category 5, the top of the scale. And why did it become a 5? Because these are the temperatures of the water compared to normal, and there's this extra warm area. The whole Gulf, the whole Atlantic was super warm last year. And so if you have the right conditions, any of these hurricanes can intensify like crazy, like they never did before. And again, I've been following these since I was a kid. It's different. Things are different. All of these floods happened in 2023 across the world. Look at that. And then we had these flood disasters, many of them last year, all different parts of the country. So you want a parallel? Well, what steroids do to a body? That's the same person. That is Barry Bonds. In his early years, one of the greatest players ever before he turned into this monster and created records that no longer are official, and a Hall of Fame that he is no longer going to, even though he could have gone just based on that part of his career. They called it juiced. He was juiced, and Mark McGwire was juiced, and Sammy Sosa and other pitchers. Well, the earth is juiced now. There's more moisture in the air. That's why we're getting all of these floods. The science of it is cut and dried. You increase carbon dioxide, you increase the temperature. It's a no-brainer. It's so obvious. And it was predicted back nearly 200 years ago, where the guy first put out a paper talking about how it was going to warm because of carbon dioxide. Simple science. And there's the CO2 levels, highest in a million years. And look at the rate that it's going up. If you squeeze that scale to show a million years. Now, we're talking about computer models and science and improved forecasts. Well, the climate scientists who go ahead and do this stuff have been really, really good. And this is the temperature trend. And the black is the basic forecast that was made in 2000. And this is their error margin, potential range. And then, in order to give a little extra credibility to a forecast, what they do is hindcast. You take the weather information from 1970 and use the same computer model to start the prediction from then. And look how accurate it is. They've done a great job, and anybody who's saying they're exaggerating the threat of climate, that proves that they haven't. And we have these changes that have happened as a result of these increased temperatures. This is call a tropical river of moisture. It's now known as an atmospheric river. They happen in the West Coast a lot. They happen in the East Coast too. And this one was with Helene. And that's partly why Helene had so much rain and so much flooding, because the moisture was coming up from the Caribbean. Record moisture. And the more you warm, the more moisture there is. The amount of moisture in the air, measured by what's called precipitable water, that goes up with the temperature. It's, again, simple physics. It's like taking something out of your pocket. If I let go of it, what's going to happen? Is there a science that can predict that? Well, that's the end of my car keys, so if anybody can give me a drive home. It's as obvious as gravity. But now, things are accelerating even more. All right, here's the part of telling like it is and being real. This is now worse than we ever thought it could be at this point and from this point on, unless things change. Look at the increase. This is in the precipitable water in the mid-latitudes where most of us live and travel, and this just in the last few years. There it was. It was steady, relatively speaking, up until the mid-90s. Then it accelerated. Now it's skyrocketing. This is new. There's a new graphic just out. And so, by late century, all these areas in the dark blue are going to have rain increasing by at least 40% in extreme precipitation. I don't care so much about how many days it rains or what the total rain is for the year. You might care if you're planning a vacation or worried about flooding in your backyard, but when it comes to weather disasters, it's the extreme weather that is doing this. And so we're not just seeing a rise in temperature. We're seeing a tremendous rise in the moisture also, and that means rain. So there's the temperature, there's the carbon dioxide. Methane is also actually a more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. It just doesn't stay in the air as long. Nitrous oxide, I mean, everything's increasing. And now, you know, if you take a 10-year average, again, from the 70s to 2000, it didn't change much. But look at this. It's off the charts. So, when you've heard, and I'm sure you've heard, that we want to try to keep warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius in order to prevent catastrophic effects. It's over. We're already there, or this close from it. That's a debate in science right now, climate science, whether we're there this year or we're going to be there a couple years from now. 20 years ago, they never thought that. And now, with the acceleration over the last few years, there's some of the top climate scientists putting out studies just in the last few months, okay, saying we crossed or just about hit 1.5 2025. We keep at this rate, we're going to get to 2 degrees in 10 years. We're not talking about the end of the century. We were talking about that like 20 years ago. that by the end of the century, we may go up by 2 degrees. And 2 degrees is a lot, as you'll see. But 2 degrees? Well, yeah, I mean, your grandparents may still be around to witness that. And this is the guy who started the public information, testified in front of Congress since 1988, saying that we already have evidence of the warming. 1988. And now his latest paper, although it's somewhat controversial, turns out his forecasts have been incredibly accurate, so you don't just throw his ideas out the window, is that there is accelerated warming and that will continue. This is where it's supposed to go. This is where it's headed. So if he's right, we're in even bigger trouble. So Hansen says, of course, the lower estimates of the IPCC, the international group that's been around for decades, this possibility is ridiculous. He says even the 2-degree goal is dead. And if we keep on the growth level that we have been, well, we're closer to 3 degrees. And his study shows that we're more in the high growth track. That would get us closer to 4 degrees by 2100. Now, 4 degrees seem like a lot. Well, just to think, you have a fever of 100, so you're not feeling too good. You got 104? You got problems. And here is what, that's Fahrenheit. Why is this happening? Why are we getting this acceleration all of a sudden? If you can't explain it, then you can't justify your claims. And so first we had the evidence that this is happening. Now they're going to try to figure out why it's happening so they can believe their own data, their own computers. And guess what's happened since 2020? Shipping has gotten cleaner. We had the Clean Air Act in 1970 in this country, and the pollution got cleared up beautifully. Unfortunately, one of the side effects of cleaner air is more sunshine reaching the ground and the temperature goes up more. There's your trade-off. And now they've done this with shipping across the Atlantic and Pacific. And look at the ship emissions. Within a year or two, 5 times the impact. So what happens is, it's all about how much of the sun's rays come down and how much gets radiated back into space. And then where's the difference between the two? So the difference used to be here, and now it is by far the biggest we've ever seen. So we do have more radiation coming in, so it should be accelerating the warming. We also know the albedo, which again radiates back into space. They can measure that. That's not a very good trend. But the reason for that is, again, we have to explain why. There's less ice. There's less cloud cover. We didn't necessarily know about this until like the last year or so. The IPCC has always backed off on, well, we're not including clouds because we don't know if it's going to be a positive or negative factor. Now we know. Less cloud cover means more sunshine. Deforestation, land use changes, all that has led to this. And as a result, the disasters go up, and the sea level goes up. Now, it's been going up steadily, right? But in this period, it was going up 2 millimeters a year, and in the same period, just a few decades later, it's doubled. You talk about worrying about sea level going up a couple of inches? That's another piece of propaganda. It's already going up close to a foot, especially up the East Coast. It's already, and now accelerating, going up. So that rate doubled. So if anything, the forecasts have underestimated the impacts: hurricane intensity, rain intensity, air temperatures, water temperatures, glacier ice melt, which is happening faster than expected. I'm sure many of you heard about Glacier National Park in this country. It's in Montana. No more glaciers. It's Glacier National Park. I think there used to be glaciers there. So it's increasing evidence that our area is going to experience more floods, hurricanes, and much more coastal flooding with sea level rise, causing more frequent floods, many records broken. Areas that have never flooded before will flood. If you or somebody you know or related to has had water come close in Ida, that doesn't mean you're safe. That means you're going to get flooded eventually. And it may not take a generation for that to happen. So the good news is that we have technology. Just like we made weather forecasts better, we made energy usage better and more efficient. And we have to do this. Be more resilient and adapt to what is coming, because the studies show that it will cost way more to do nothing. Now, you talk about how much something's going to cost, and these solutions, some of them are just astronomical amounts, and that you get laughed at by politicians when you talk about trying to do this. What they're talking about doing in New York, it's like a $70–80 billion project. You know, the water is coming up, and then these giant balls come out of the ocean and rise and block like they do in parts of Europe. They're going to spend that amount of money? If they don't, New York's flooding. Lots of New York. But we have a revolution going on, not just here, but around the world. Solar. California, so these solar plants, the biggest solar plants in the whole world now are in China. So again, people tell you, well, we need China and India to do stuff first before China's doing it. And they realize, and they had the dirtiest air in the world just, 10 years ago, and they're doing massive projects to clean up their air. But you see all of these solar farms, why can't you put solar on top of these flat buildings in every city in the country? Why can't you put a solar canopy over every open parking lot? It can be done. The technology's there. And the amount of money that companies and governments will save in energy bills more than balances that out. It's there. The technology's there. The wind, California, on land, offshore, New Jersey, Australia, North Sea. Again, China. Biggest wind farms in the whole world now. They know what's going on. Nuclear, somewhat controversial over the years, becoming less controversial now because they're making it into smaller projects, not dangerous, and non-polluting. The electric vehicles, I guess you're going to see some of those a little bit later. There's charging stations. I drove here in an electric vehicle. I drove 40 miles. I probably can accelerate faster than anybody in this room or most people in this city. These cars fly. You want to merge into the Schuylkill Expressway on the left lane like they idiots designed it like this? Obsolete before it was done. To merge from the left. All right? I could just fly right in there. My wife will tell you, she's going like this. And I'm not even gunning it fully. And I will never have to buy gas again. And I charged the car in the garage. Just did it last night while we're sleeping. Now, the costs have been an issue. The tax breaks are now going to be an issue again. But guess what? The costs keep coming down. And the cost of solar keeps coming down. And it's going to get to the point where it's going to be so much cheaper to put solar on homes than to use regular electricity. Do you really not want solar if it's going to cut your electricity bill in half? Well, how about buying cars? China, again, they have electric vehicles, nice ones, well-reviewed ones, $20,000. They just put out a smaller version, a car to hold 4 people, $10,000. You can't buy them in this country, but lots of other countries in the world can. So there's all this other technology that you have. It's just the motivation. And we don't have a choice because I showed you the trends. The trends are there. Human civilization has not lived even with a 2-degree warmer climate than what we have now, let alone 4. The entire history of human civilization is not above 2 degrees. Humans are not adaptable that fast. We do believe in evolution, but evolution's a slow process in many cases. You know, I talked about 4 degrees warmer. When it was 4 degrees colder, we were in an ice age. That's how big a difference 4 degrees is. Ice age versus what? There's no planet B, and this is from World War II. It's a sort of technology. It can be done. If they decide they don't want to do it in this country for a few years, then we got other parts of the world to be doing it. But we have no choice. There are books that you can read that have more optimistic views than a lot of people and even a lot of climate scientists think. There's a new one by Catherine Hayhoe and one by Tom Steyer just within the past year. They're also in a positive solution kind of area. And there are links where you can get more information on this, keep up with the latest science. This thing, First Street, this is now, it was nonprofit, now it's for-profit. They can tell you the odds of a flood in your house, any spot in the country. They can program it and talk about what kind of storm it would take to flood your house. The government, their data on that kind of stuff is 20 years old. And now the latest update on that is frozen. And this site, for example, may not be long for us. It's still up, but a whole lot of government sites are already down, and projects are down, and research is down. But again, we have no choice. You're the ones who get it. You're the ones who understand it. You're the ones who have enough interest here on a Saturday to come out and talk about it. Now you've got to go out and spread the word to your colleagues, to your friends, to your relatives, to your representatives, and vote as if the future of the planet depends on it, because it does. Now, anybody ready to give up? Anybody ready to give up? No. Okay, and I'm done my message. Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Glenn, for empowering us this morning. It was a little doom and gloom there for a minute, but you're telling it like it is. So we appreciate that. So unfortunately, we don't have a handheld mic, but we do have some time for questions. I know after seeing the latest science, and I'll say Glenn had this updated as of Friday of last week, so it is the very latest. But happy to take any questions for Glenn. Mike.
Great presentation, thank you.
Just so you're aware, I will repeat your question so everyone can hear it after.
Good acoustics in this room.
For our recording as well.
Oh, okay. All right.
Mike Ewald with Energy Justice Network. Thank you for the great presentation on the latest science. I just wanted to take issue with some of the things on one of your later slides where you mentioned nuclear power, you mentioned bioenergy and hydrogen as other solutions. I would say that these are false solutions. Nuclear power is not renewable. It's also not clean. We're safe. We're pollution-free. We're cheap. There's the most racist form of energy we have too. It's one of many false solutions. We have a booklet here about false solutions to climate change. I have a whole stack. I'm happy to pass these around if you want. I would ask that we can talk later about taking those off of your slides.
Okay.
I'd like to ask Becca if I could do a presentation at next year's conference on false solutions to climate change.
Okay. For example, he hasn't mentioned it, but there's something called carbon capture, and it's become a big business in some areas, and it showed some promise theoretically years ago, but that is definitely coming into the area of a false solution and a waste of money. The nuclear is controversial, it's debatable. There are lots of climate scientists who think that we are so desperate. We're not talking about 3 Mile Island type plants. We're talking about the small ones that can be built quickly and add up. Yeah, look, there are lots of scientists who disagree with you on that. And I want to let it out because science changes and understandings of science change. And we're getting into a position where that novel that I wrote called The Weathermaker, it was about partly about what's known as geoengineering, trying to fix the climate. Let's cool it by throwing stuff up in the atmosphere or throwing some stuff in the ocean and changing that albedo and radiation balance. And, my whole life has been, oh, you can't do this. But I'm telling you, we are in a position where we're talking about the end of billions of people, about billions of people having to be displaced. Billions. And there are prices that are going to have to be paid for this, not just financial. There are dangers with some of this, too. But we're getting into the point, especially with nothing, not only nothing being done, but going backwards at the moment, which puts us in even a more precarious position. So we have to open up our minds a little bit to unconventional things, but we got to study them. And this carbon capture thing, that's being promoted by the oil companies who are just looking for some kind of excuse to keep selling us oil and gas and not go to electric or solar or wind or any of that. So we do have to be careful about where these so-called solutions are coming from. But nuclear is one of those things being debated. There is not universal agreement on that. And there are plenty of climate scientists who agree with this gentleman that we should not be touching that.
Okay, next we have a question from Robbie.
Thanks, Becca. Thank you, Glenn. My question is about, because you had mentioned the oil companies, fossil fuel industry has long known about this and continued to lobby for the problem. Have you seen in your research and your travels places around the world, or specifically maybe the country, where utilities have gotten it right in how they either make that transition more just to renewables or help support communities, municipalities in that transition?
Generally speaking, they will not volunteer for any of that if it cuts into their bottom line at any level or affect their stockholders at any level, because they're answering to the stockholders more than they're answering to us.
Stakeholders.
But stockholders.
Right, they're answering to
Our stakeholders, right.
Yeah.
But other parts of the world, the fossil fuel industry does not own the government. The government runs and decides what the fossil fuel industry can get away with, and that we're going to cut it back, or we're going to tax it. We're going to make it more difficult to do that and easier to do the wind and solar and all this other stuff. That's how all these projects get built. Because in many cases, China's one example. They're throwing money into this now. There are plenty of countries that are doing that. There's one country in Scandinavia now, I think it's 100% renewable.
Wow.
I mean, it can be done. I mean, this is a huge, huge country with a huge population and huge demands for power. So I don't know that we'll ever be 100% renewable, but we could double it in a few years.
Yeah.
We can 10 times it in a couple decades. I mean, the technology is going straight up, the price is coming straight down.
So legislation is probably your recommendation for one of the first next steps?
Yeah, you somehow have to take the power out of the companies who profit from these renewable things not happening. And the company that I do some of this consulting work for, AKRF, they work with the wind projects, for example, and one of them was canceled, and now it just got saved in New York, at least temporarily, it's saved. But not only do we have to stop canceling them, we got to add more.
And if I may add as well to that, we did hear, and for those who weren't able to join us, Taiwan is also an
Yeah.
incredible country leading the way in their solar implementation through their support from their central government, as well as at county levels. If you want to learn more about that, the session was recorded from earlier this week, and they do touch on how they're also implementing floating solar. Next question over here.
So hi, I'm Ann Mitchell, nurse, citizen, with Climate Reality Today. So feeding off that, so now I'm going to look into your expertise, not only as a meteorologist, but as a communicator. So you were just talking about wind power. A lot of controversy in New Jersey. Not necessarily that I think it's a hoax, but can't have this wind, it's going to block my view at the beach. So I'm asking you, you know, those people that that are against things because of the aesthetics or inconvenience. What are like 2 or 3 really good bullet points that you can share with people, to get a conversation going to maybe further their understanding, so that they're like, maybe instead of saying, calling their legislator, don't do it, maybe they're saying like, well, maybe there's some value.
Yeah,
So
the
if you could speak to that.
the first and most important answer to that is, or question to them is, do you care about your children and grandchildren's future? Do you want your grandchildren to be able to inherit this nice house that you have on the beach? Because there won't be a beach. The beach will be 20 miles inland. You won't be able to afford insurance anywhere near the coast of New Jersey. In the not too distant future, in Florida, insurance rates are going up 50+% a year. People are putting their houses up for sale not because they're afraid of a hurricane coming in, they can't afford the insurance anymore. And then the other thing that it can also affect, and is happening in maybe other parts of the world, is that there are lawsuits now. These companies that have made all these profits and knew about this danger for 50 years, and we have the evidence, for example, directly from Exxon, from 1982, where their scientists showing exactly the relationship between carbon dioxide and temperature. So nobody could say they didn't know. Lawsuits? Aesthetics? Really? Look at, show them the floods and the hurricanes and the storm surges and the sea level rise evidence of what's happening. And it's just going to get more and more obvious over the years. But one of the problems with humanity, and it may even be more in this country than others, is that we care more about ourselves than about our neighbors, and then about our planet. And we need to at least give it equal time, let alone shift it in the other direction. Not in my backyard. I don't want to see those wind things. They also do not kill birds. They do not kill whales. They do not kill anything except the cost of your power. That's what is so scary to these companies. Guess what? Nobody owns the sun. Nobody owns the wind. Where can they make a profit on that? That's where the people have to push a little bit. I'm not voting for you unless you allow this wind thing off New Jersey. Okay? There's a governor's election. What are their stances on that? That's an obvious right here and now issue.
We do have time for just one more question formally, but Glenn will be with us throughout the rest of the day, and I'm going to pass it to Peter, who had his hand up.
So, a lot of us have been working in this problem for a long time. We've been working it a long time. 5, 10 years ago, I don't know when it happened, meteorologists, weather people in the media started talking about climate, we were really happy about that. And we're still not happy that they don't know how to talk about climate solutions. But is it my imagination, or have they backed away from that
Well,
communication?
yeah. That really varies from city to city. There are some cities, even in the South, even in the red states, where there are courageous meteorologists who have long-standing reputations and credibility, who are not afraid to get on the air and say, this flood was enhanced by climate change. A friend of mine, a great legend in meteorology in Miami, John Morales. He made national news just this past week by saying correctly at the start of hurricane season, I want you to know that you can't trust my forecast as much this hurricane season as before, because there is less data, there are fewer forecasters, we have fewer flights going into hurricanes. They have drones. Again, science has advanced. That with no human danger at all can float into the eye of the hurricane and give measurements and send them back. They canceled that whole program. That program is gone, at least for now. So there are pockets of that, yes. There's way too little of it. When I started doing climate stuff, I was writing blogs, I guess it was back 2010 or something. My boss, I wanted to do a half-hour special on climate. And my boss, these are people with news backgrounds. They don't understand science. He said, if you're going to talk about this, we need to hear from the other side. And I tried to explain to him, there is no other side when it comes to the science part. When it comes to solutions, there's another side. There's debates about solutions. Let's debate about solutions and not the problem. But just to give you an idea, a lot of meteorologists, and I know a lot of them in TV around the country, there's a surprising amount who are very different politically from other non-TV scientists. It's a little weird. Physicists also tend to be more toward the hoax variety than anything resembling an environmental science. So it's taken longer for TV meteorologists to accept it, to understand how dire it is, and to have the courage to talk about it. I didn't get much negative feedback when I was writing blogs, but they sure didn't give me a lot of time on TV to talk about it. You know, you got a 2-minute weathercast. How much can you talk about climate while you're given a 10-day? Unless they want to give you more time or to do that special. And I had to drive me kicking and screaming to put this guy on TV. To say just garbage. And I don't want to be a part of that. How do you fight that? When the management, who are not scientists, insist, and the corporations who own the media insist, or are now scared of doing and saying certain things. So you think it's bad, or is it getting bad? It's going to get worse in the next couple of years. I think so.
So unfortunately, that's all the time we had for formal questions, but I'd love for all of us to thank Glenn so much. So what an incredible presentation, and on behalf of all of Delaware County, I would like to thank you for your years of service as well as your participation in our 4th annual Delaware County Sustainability Conference. Thank you. So this week, we have been informed by cutting-edge climate science, innovations from around the world, and have been empowered to take ownership over sustainability in our communities, recognizing that we all have a role to play, and have been inspired by sustainability superstars who are already leading the charge. As we prepare to dismiss today, I encourage all of you to take the momentum from this week and really jumpstart action within your communities. Whether it's writing your legislators about House Bill 109, and I'm pointing to Lloyd who presented about that, attending a meeting about your local watershed planning efforts. You can chat with Nat Lands or NMS about that. Meeting your local farmers, or even sharing what you have learned this week with your friends and neighbors. To learn more about opportunities for taking action and getting involved, from now until about 2:15 this afternoon, I now encourage all of you to visit our exhibitors in the back, where you can learn boots on the ground how you can get involved in each of these topics we've learned about this week. I will say, unfortunately, because of the air quality, we are not doing our full-blown EV Expo, but I will say if you feel comfortable and safe in your own health, we do have a section of the parking lot cordoned off with EVs with their information in the windows, so if you feel safe to do so. We would also still like to encourage you, unfortunately, while we didn't get to set up in the quarantine station, we do still have access to museum exhibits on the 2nd floor of the building right across the parking lot. And those are brought to you by the Italian Heritage Center of Delaware Valley, as well as the Swedish Colonial Society and the Tinicum Township Historical Society. And I encourage you to head over there because they've also had ghost sightings. And finally, in final closing, I just want to give a final shout out to all of our amazing planning team, our volunteers, sponsors, and incredible speakers this week for making this possible. And of course, thank you to all of you for braving the crazy air quality and technology this week, for your participation in the 4th annual Delaware County Sustainability Conference and continued commitment to sustain Delco. So thank you, everyone.